Good evening, section crew, and welcome back to the Second Section podcast. I'm your host, Greasy Meat Hands, and tonight I'm going to be joined by none other than Mike Ostertag. Mike. How you doing? How's it going tonight?
I've been looking forward to this all week because I have had a pretty bad week, and
Aha.
it's just it's going to be nice to just sit down, relax, and talk for trains for an hour or so, hour or two, or however long this takes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too because tonight's main topic is something that you and I are pretty familiar with, and that's freelance model railroads. So I know that I got the old branding on tonight here for the Mascoutin Valley.
I have double branding going
You
on
have
tonight.
double branding. Ooh,
I got
the
my
Farland
Farland
Term-
Terminal. Yeah, my Farland
Yeah.
Terminal shirt, and in the background, wait a minute, wrong hand. Right here is a mirror that I had made for my Wisconsin and Midwestern Railroad.
See, and I think that's almost more important than the model railroad itself, is that you have to have swag for the model railroad, because I mean, how do people know that you're a freelance model railroad? So,
Right.
yeah. So we got 16 people already joined the live show here. Tim D, hello. Isaac, hello. Thunder Ridge Railroad is in the house. Weston Overland in the house. MRL Trains is here. David Winther. Thomas Klamoski is joining us this evening in the chat. Adam Cruz is here as well. As tonight's podcast carries on, feel free to ask questions. And if you're in the chat tonight, say hello, give a shout out, and yeah, have some fun. Again, normal standard model railroad podcast on the internet's rules apply. Let's keep it fairly decent tonight. That way I don't have to boot you out of the chat. So Mike, it's been a fun week to say the least. And tonight we're talking about the freelance model railroad, freelance model railroads. But first, we're going to follow our normal show schedule where it's just you and I, and we're going to talk about what's on our workbench. And then I'm going to assume we have a short line of the show.
Oh, do we ever?
Do we? Oh, okay. I always look forward to it. And then we'll get on to our main topic of freelance model railroads. I got some content that I want to show off as well. And then, but at the very least, it's a topic that I really, really like. So a few more people joined us in the chat. Wigwag Workshop is here tonight. Hello. Graham Stockfield, Robert Walkowski, Split Rock Mining Company is here. Welcome, Tom and David Karkowski. So welcome,
does
everybody.
Tom even work anymore?
I'm not sure. I
want his job.
I see him online a fair amount. So yeah, good stuff. Anyways, so moving right along, it's been a fun week. Have you had much opportunity to get out on the workbench since our last show?
I've had ample opportunities to get out on the workbench, and I've got, sometimes it's not always about the big stuff, the big projects that you're doing. Sometimes it's just the little things that you're doing, and sometimes it's just about trying something to see if it will work or seeing how something looks. And I'm going to share my screen here real quick, if it's all right. Let's see here, share screen, and we're going to go here and here, and we're going to go right to my inbox here, and I'm going to show a couple of, I emailed myself some pictures. Yeah. Okay, first, one of the things I did on my layout is I put up the fascia all the way around my layout. So, or at least about 90% of it's up. And I should actually, if you would indulge me here quickly, I have to find there it is. I
Ah,
forgot I forgot to send myself the, full-on photo, of my layout showing all of the fascia in.
yeah.
There we But as you can see right here, uh, I have the fascia in. This is so simply pre-stained right from Menards. It's a 3-inch by quarter inch, m just square molding. That's
I
it, just
see.
flat stock, Oaks flat stock. And the difference is, I think there's a $2 difference between the natural, the unstained stuff and the stained stuff, and for $2, I'll let Menards do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a lot less headaches. It's even. You don't have to worry about, "Oh, goodness, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, this doesn't look right," whatever. And then so, I'm hoping that I don't screw this up too bad right here. I just wanna
Okay.
check my mail quick. Here's the way it ended up looking.
Oh,
T
wow.
So, it turns out where it finishes the edge of the layout really nicely. I have it sticking up about a quarter of an inch. Actually, I took a block of, like, a scrap piece of this molding, and I went and I just kinda put it up against the edge, and I used that to level where I wanted the edge to go all the way around the whole layout.
Okay.
So so that way I have something to, like, put scenery against, I can put buildings against. Not really worried about cars falling off of it,
Sure.
but more or less just something so that it's not, right at surface level,
Yeah.
and since I have a relatively flat contour to my layout, I didn't bother trying to put any shape into it or any kind of hillsides or
Yeah.
anything like that because I want you to be able to see all that. And then right here, if you look, I have switch machine knobs in, and I
Aha.
have I have my blue points. I have blue points under here,
Okay.
and I can cover this in a little bit more detail, maybe with a video on my Farland terminal page when I get over to doing the switch that's over here. Uh, but what this is it's remote control aircraft linkage cable. It's like a sleeve with a yellow cable that goes through plastic. It's all plastic. And then the knobs are simply uh like flower pots, wooden flower pots
Right.
that you could find where they just screwed through the bottom, or they come with a hole in the bottom. I just put a screw through it right into the linkage and just pulls it back and forth. There's no worry about it stripping out or anything like that. And the switches, they all work really well. Then the other thing I've also done is I've put in a couple of 3D printed proto throttle holders in a couple of spots on the
Oh,
layout. Yeah. These
yes.
I got these done in St. Louis last year from the boys
Okay.
down at Iowa Scale Engineering, and,
Hashtag not sponsored.
hashtag not sponsored.
First one of the night, folks.
Yep,
Hashtag not sponsored.
but the beautiful thing about these is, that they fit lower down. I do have a couple of other ones that I had to make. I had to build. They were laser cut, and they're really, really nice, but they sit way too high.
Yep.
They're a lot higher up than what I prefer, and in order to secure them to the layout the way I want, uh, I would actually have to put a piece and drop a piece down underneath where this is just to secure it, and I really
Mhm.
don't wanna do that. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
got them there as a backup, but I'm gonna probably pick up a couple of more of these, as time goes on. So, another thing I did is Lines
Uh-oh.
West. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
Lines West, makes the Milwaukee Road style of switch stands, and not
Yeah.
the Milwaukee Road wasn't the only one that used these. There were several railroads around the United States that used these, but the Milwaukee Roads are the most, you know, known, and I use the Milwaukee Road's feather target for my Farland Terminal Railroad, and the reason I do that is, and we'll get into developing the story of your railroad
Mm,
later. But the reason I did this is because uh, when the railroad was built, the Milwaukee Road was actually like a partner contractor type of thing. So they used their switch stands, you know. So there's a whole different story and a backstory to this that I will get into a little later.
okay.
Uh, but they this does not operate yet. I haven't got that far, but I did just get it to the point where, hey, this looks pretty slick. Uh,
Yeah.
um, the other thing I've done is, again, from Iowa Scale Engineering.
Ooh.
These you cannot pick these. I am gonna say this much right
I
now.
hate it when people do this.
I know these are not. I do not believe these are available. What these are is it is the plate for the throttle boxes that they come in, the covers,
Sure.
you know. And so I picked up a whole bunch of them for really not a whole lot. Uh, and I decided to use them as maybe a diagram plate. And so I just taped off the track diagram onto it with some of the Tamiya 6mm masking tape.
Yeah.
And I just took some orange spray paint and just went over the top of it. And obviously it's not done because I have to letter it and everything yet. But and it's only on here with it's on here with blue painter's tape that's doubled over on top of itself. So it's kind of just sticking there. so so it was just kind of mocked up. But here
But you you
you can
can't
see
see
those
it from
switch.
the road mic though. I mean, you would never know that that's just held onto your fascia with blue painter's tape.
No,
No.
I know. I got kind of stupid lucky with it that way. But
Yeah.
here you can see the those little flower pots. You can
Yeah.
see how they screw into the linkage. Uh, the other thing I did is I started to work on the rest of the trackage. This switch that was right here, it's actually right here. This is one of my other um, victim switches that had gotten all cattywampus on me earlier in the
Mm.
year,
Yep.
and so it was time for me to start taking this out and rebuilding the switch. Well, I might as well rebuild the curve, and I actually took the uh, trackage, the flex track out all the way to the switch that connects right here. So like this is, you can see the flex track still there when I took this picture.
Yep.
I took it. This is all gone now. So now it all looks like this, as well as the lumber company spur. This is going to be Frischella's lumber, and then this is going to be, I'm going to reuse this switch and get it working the proper way. And as of right now, it sits. That's the way it looks. This is the ties are glued down. The switch is not spiked in yet.
Hmm.
So so far I'm pretty happy with the way that's all progressed. Um, and to kind of quote Tom Jacobs a little bit, this kind of goes into the hour a day thing.
Sure.
You come down, you spend a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, whatever you have handy, and you just make yourself productive, and you just go ahead and do what you can do. And when it's quitting time, it's quitting time. This stuff isn't going to go anywhere. It's going to be there tomorrow. So you don't have to try to get everything done in all one fall swoop. So that's what I've been working on. A
So
little bit here and there.
that is really so that's quite a nice flurry of activity you've had going on here in the past couple of weeks since we last talked. And I know you had I know it's not necessarily a what's on your workbench topic, but did you not in our hiatus here, did you not attend the proto an RPM meet up in the Twin Cities?
Let me tell you something.
Oh boy.
I had one of the most fun Saturdays I've
Yeah.
had in a long time over at the I believe it's the Twin Cities division of the NMRA's
Okay.
modelers retreat. It's basically an RPM. It's open to anybody. You don't have
Really?
to be an NMRA member to be there because
Nice.
I'm not. And,
Yep.
there Ken Ziska does a great job putting it on. If it weren't
Hmm.
for him, I don't know that we'd have one around here. But all sorts of really cool models. You know what? That was so dumb on me. I have a ton of pictures here of
Sure.
that. I should have loaded them up. But it was so fantastic.
Yeah.
Good clinics. Scott
Yep.
Thornton put on a good one about his Iowa interstate layout.
Ooh.
Um yeah, Bob Rivard did one on open top or open open top loads or open loads like flat car loads, gondola loads, things like
Nice.
that.
Those are always fun.
I tell you what, was it ever interesting and a lot of really good information. Um, uh, yeah,
And I think,
Tom cornered me and interviewed me, and I think he may have lived to regret that because you know how I am. If somebody asks me a question, there's never a short answer. So,
yep,
but it was a great time. It was an awesome time, and I never go to one of those things without learning something.
sure.
So,
So
yeah,
out of curiosity, Mike, I'm just going to keep pestering you so you can't transfer files back and forth. Um, but out of curiosity, did you take any models with you
I did.
to display? What did you display?
I did. I displayed my Farland terminal switch engine,
Ah,
my Milwaukee Road SW7 that's in progress,
okay,
A Milwaukee Road GP9 that I have in progress,
okay.
uh, my GP35. Oh, wait a minute. Did I take my GP35? Um, my GP38-2 went with me. My GP20 that I did in Milwaukee Road went with. The engine house I had went with, and then
Okay.
a handful of freight cars.
So I'm gonna ask a question here. Did you post that to your Farland Terminal Facebook page?
I believe I did. I
Okay,
believe
so
there was a ton of pictures that I took. Oh, I also took that Milwaukee Road caboose I'd been working on.
uh-huh,
Um, and the one thing about these things like the modeler's retreat and these RPMs, everybody wants to come and show off their like, hey, the this is gonna be kind of condescending, but the hey, look at what I've gotten done, or
sure,
look at what I've done type models. Yeah, there we go. Uh, and it's these RPMs really encourage bringing unfinished items. It that's that's where the real topic of conversation comes in, is where the how the unfinished models get to the point where they're at, or how you got to something, especially if you have one that's done, one that's not, and it's the same engine.
yeah,
So you could show the progress. That's what these RPMs are all about, and a sharing of information, a big bonding opportunity for to meet new modelers. I forget everybody's name because I'm old, but it's but so many great people that came and asked questions, so many compliments. The atmosphere was electric. It wasn't
electric.
like
Man, I must have missed one heck of a modeler's retreat.
there were a heck of a lot of good conversations going on. Thomas Gazier actually had a very funny uh a little thing at their booth that if you wanted to complain about the SDL 39, it cost you $1. And at one point,
I still owe Tom $1 for that.
yeah, and it's just uh, it was just amazing and a lot of fun, a lot of
Good.
good side conversations, and like I said, the clinics were amazing. These guys do such a good job. I suggest anybody that can get to the modelers retreat next spring, or next March next March, I believe it's the next one. Uh, Go to it. It will definitely be worth your while. It absolutely will be. So
That's awesome. Like I just, I've heard a lot about it. So on the Crossing Gate podcast, with Tom and crew over there, they talked about it. We had William Sampson on. I know he was a participant in it, and quite a few people in the chat tonight were there as well. So if you were there at the modelers retreat in the Twin Cities, just give a shout out and a howdy do to and a thanks to Tom and the crew that helped put that on over there in the Twin Cities. So
I do want to show you one thing here quick.
okay.
This is ridiculous. I cannot remember the gentleman's name, but he went, and I got to just double check to make sure I got this in here, because we're well-oiled machine here.
It is this. I mean, if production value is what you're looking for in a model railroad podcast, the second section podcast is no finer of an example of smooth production here for model railroad podcasting, and it's I think it's what gets the big draw. So while you're looking for that,
it's right here.
You got
Do you see this? Yeah, check.
Oh my gosh, I better get that on screen. Okay, what are we looking at here, Mike?
That's an N scale passenger depot that's completely fictional and completely scratch built.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's nuts. This is kind of some of the things that were there.
Oof. That's amazing. So let me ask you this: did Rivet Counter Randy come along and kind of call you out that your switcher that you had in there wasn't of a true prototype, or was the freelance crowd, I guess, accepted at the RPM as well?
The freelance crowd is always accepted at the RPMs. There were several freelance opportunity or let's see, what are they trying to say? Freelance displays is a good way of putting it. And I just want to find one more picture. I feel really bad. I apologize to everybody for being so ill prepared with this thing, because I just totally forgot all about that, even though it was a phenomenal night. It was so let's see here. Where am I at? I'll have to send this. There are so many. There was just ridiculous amounts of freelance stuff there.
Really?
Yeah, there were a lot. I'll post on our page some of the photos from it, and I'm sure that there are other photos that are. Here's another shot of that depot. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
And this is all, he's told me it's just a conglomeration of a lot of different favorite depots that he's had. He just made it into one building.
Wow.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's very detailed. So, like I say, it was a lot of fun. Freelancers are more than welcome there. So
that's awesome. So the name is just a bit of a misnomer. It's just for people that really enjoy good modeling and sharing the process and talking trains, right?
It's a modeler's retreat. It's not actually a RPM. They just call it. It's a modeler's retreat. So
that's outstanding.
It's open to anybody that models. So
cool. Well, I'm just chomping at the.
How about you?
Bit here. I actually did some stuff and things this week and this past couple of weeks that I'm really, I guess, proud of myself. So as a younger, I guess, youngish modeler, just getting back into things, I got the old you'll recognize these, right? The tortoise switch machine here, and this, some people are just absolutely terrified of these things because they can be a little intimidating to wire up, but I managed to, and again, this is just a demonstration here, but I managed to do this whole thing without even using the soldering iron. And so if any of you guys know me, I am not deathly afraid of the soldering iron. I just choose not to use it because I think there are better ways to go about stuff. So basically what we have here is I have a terminal connector that is got plug into a wall wart. And we're going to do a live demo here and let's see if this works.
You know what's going to happen.
You know it's going to crash and burn horribly, right? Let's see here. Do I have it even plugged in? I have no idea. So we're going to give it a shot here. Look at that.
Ooh,
This is high grade quality
pretty.
entertainment. You know, a guy just did a he did a wire up of the tortoise machine. But then the other thing that I did this week, so that AccuRail model that I did for Model Railroad News, I actually went ahead and did a weathering video on it. And so here's the model here. So I went ahead and this is my first attempt at graffiti, but I didn't use any chalks, no pan pastels, no weathering, or excuse me, just nothing but airbrush, paints, oils, that type of stuff to get the car weathered.
Did you happen to have kind of a template type of thing, or did you see a car that you like the graffiti stood out to you that you said, "Oh,
No,
I'd kind of like to try that," or did you just kind of wing it?
I just winged it. And again, I used some materials that what?
I just noticed a name on the screen.
Oh,
Greasy meat hands.
Yeah, the greasy meat hands. Yeah. I did wash my hands prior to handling that car, but for me it was just I just wanted to wing it and try to do some stuff freehand. And so I did a YouTube video on it. So if you go over to my Andy Dorsch YouTube channel out there, you can find the video for that. Again, hashtag not sponsored here, but I used like a texture paste for the lading spills. I used some different washes and enamels, basically stealing a lot of techniques from military modelers, and essentially applying that as opposed to just plastering pan pastels or some other things like powders and chalks to the model. So thought it turned out pretty well for, again, a first attempt. So, and I got some good feedback from some people giving me some tips on how to do better tags and stuff. So pretty excited about that.
That's really cool. I'm not a big fan of graffiti because of the arrow that I model.
Sure.
But definitely see, I've got some pictures that I've taken from work. If you want to challenge yourself, I've got a couple that I'd kind of like to see.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
like grape ape. I've got grape. I saw somebody did an awesome grape ape on the side of a boxcar.
yeah. So that was pretty much my last couple of weeks. Not on the video right now. I did do a little more work on the layout. So behind the camera, I put in a siding, and I'm working on finishing off that room as well, or the main layout room, and getting all the track laid and stuff like that. So I've been working on that in the past couple of weeks. So things are moving on the Mascouten Valley Railroad. So I haven't torn it down yet.
That's that's good.
So that's what's on my workbench. So just before we get into our next segment here, we do have 49 folks on the stream tonight. So again, thanks for joining us. If you joined us late, the topic this evening is freelance model railroads, and that's going to be our main topic. But before we get to that, we have our second segment of the show here, which again is a fan favorite. It's the short line of the show. So this is a segment where Mike takes over the con here, and basically we'll let Mike kind of introduce the segment. But to the folks in the chat, if you have any questions, comments, or funny little quips that you want to put in there along the way, please do so, and I'll make sure to get them up on screen. So Mike, It's time for
Yeah.
the short line of the show.
Okay, guys. This one was actually pretty easy. It's a little bit of a mysterious railroad to a degree.
Ooh.
We're traveling out east now. We're gonna leave the people in the Midwest and out west to fend for themselves for a little while. We're gonna go out
Okay.
to the east. We're gonna go east. We're
East
in
tonight.
Yeah, we're in Connecticut.
Connecticut.
Yeah, and
Okay.
the railroad that I chose is the Housatonic Railroad.
The Housatonic.
It is an iconic short line railroad. I don't know if there's too many people in the railroad industry that haven't heard of this railroad.
Really?
It is uh, it's got a really weird history to it. From what I could read, it was a thing, then it wasn't the thing, and then it became a thing again. It was, but it's based in Connecticut, and here's their main website.
Oh man, we are getting some static in the chat. That's too
Oh
big
boy,
for a short line.
nope, no, it's only 161 miles. So it is. I've done tiny railroads almost the entire time, tiny itty bitty things. This is more designed for a person who wants to try to build a basement short line railroad that
Okay.
is more than just a small shelf or something like that. That's why I went this route, because trying to mix it up a little bit. Okay.
Sure.
So they're based out of Cannon, Connecticut, and from everything that I've been able to see and understand,
Is it
they
a screen share moment, Mike?
oh, good God. Yeah, good
Yes.
Lord. I
This
don't I
again,
do this like every time?
every time. So
Every time.
it
Okay.
is it is the
Housatonic Railroad. There we
Ooh,
go.
look at that.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
pretty.
People in I mean, it is pretty. Not only are they Packer kind of colors, they're
Yeah.
C&W colors. You know, it's similar to the Chicago Northwestern, I should say, similar to it.
Sure.
But yeah, and here's their main website, their actual company website. Um they have the history on this thing. They've been around for a long time.
Oh,
Yeah, a portion, I believe a portion of the railroad is a part of it's from the New Haven, and there's part of it's like Penn Central, and it's just I suggest you go through and read on it, because there's like a lot of information out here on this railroad.
really?
Yeah, there's like a lot of information out there, uh, but it gets a little blurry the newer you go. The older stuff seems to be a little bit more clear from what I understand and what I've seen. Um,
Okay.
it freight wise, I couldn't find a whole lot. Honestly, I couldn't find a whole lot as to major commodities or what they do. Obviously, they must have, obviously they've got they do lumber. They've got covered hoppers that they're, loading and or unloading here.
Yep.
Um, it it obviously it's a pretty railroad.
Sure is.
The scenery looks gorgeous. Their main locomotives are GP35s.
What? I
Yeah.
thought those were all scrapped.
No.
No.
No. They have a couple of
Mm.
GP38-2s right now that they're leasing, but they still rely on GP35s.
Here, we're getting fact checked right in the chat here.
That's fine. You know what?
So
I have no no, I don't want to do that.
No, don't do that.
Don't do
Don't do
that.
that.
So, hey, I've got no problems with people telling me I'm, whatever.
No, it's just helping. So New Haven Rail says lumber, trash, lime, and ethanol, etc.
Yeah, that's
So,
good. Yeah. So here's a little history on on Wikipedia, and granted, it's Wikipedia, so take it for what it's worth. But I mean,
Uh-huh.
for the most part, they're relatively good. But it's a 161-mile railroad. It's been around since 1840.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it's not new. Um, and there's just a lot of information on this railroad that it's kind of fun.
Sure.
It was kind of fun to do a little bit of research. They actually had passenger service, and there was talk at one time of possibly bringing some bridge traffic passenger service back to the line, and I'm not sure whatever happened with
Wow.
that. Yeah. So it's just you guys are gonna have to do if you're interested in the Housatonic Railroad, you're gonna have to just go through and take a look at what you have. I just got a bunch of pictures here. This is a GP35M, which got the paper air filter. Obviously, it must have been deturbocharged at one time.
Yeah.
I mean, how could how could you not like? No, one thing, they don't have very many freight cars. They have hardly any. So right there, that helps with your modeling because you
Yeah,
don't have
right.
to worry about. You can just worry about the customers' cars that you need. Check this out. This is still running in Bangor and Aroostook paint.
No way.
Yeah, as you see it. This is 2014, but I have seen some pictures from 2020 and 2021 of this thing still operating just like this. They never painted it.
Wow. Well, I
Right?
mean, if it works, why give it the DuPont overhaul,
Right.
you know?
At one time, they had a small fleet of RS3s, and I believe this is the one of the last ones that were on the property. I'm not sure if this one's been scrapped yet or not.
Wow.
Even on the RS3, this paint scheme just flows real nice. But if you look, this is I believe this is a former Conrail unit because this has been repowered with an EMD.
If it got the
It's got the two little radiator fans here. It's got the EMD exhaust stacks, and yeah, this has been repowered with an EMD prime mover in it.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, there's another. I believe that's a Jeep 9, Providence and Worcestershire.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're from the Midwest. You can't say those
I
words.
can't say that. I can't. I know it's Providence and Worcester or
Worcester.
what? Worcester. But this is I believe this is a former SP unit, if I remember right. And looking at the way the lighting is set up here,
Sure.
that kind of goes that way. Another GP9. Believe this has got heritage of New York Central or Penn Central, something along those lines. Uh, but still, just look at the modeling possibilities you have with this. You have a small fleet of locomotives that is very diverse. Even though you have similar models, each one is different. This one, dynamic brakes, the SP lighting package, all the different paint scheme, and then
Lights
you
on the
go
pilot there.
lights on the Pilot. This has got the same thing, lights on a Pilot, but this has got the more traditional headlight location, paper air filter box that sticks way up.
Yeah, right.
Uh, you know, low profile fuel tank
Hmm.
underneath. You know, so the side skirting's been cut away. So there's a lot of different possibilities for modeling here. And I just got this GP that looks like a painting, doesn't it?
Yeah. It looks like something Bob Frischella would put together.
I was gonna
That's
say
just
the
a scene.
same
It's a
thing.
hashtag not sponsored, by the way.
No, no, but if you do see this, in the Old Depot Gallery website one day, you know where you saw the picture
Yeah,
first.
exactly. No,
So
that is such a cool scene there. And that could be, I mean, if you're doing small shelf layout, or even like a small basement layout or a 4x8, you come down the stairs and you come to a scene like that. That's your icon scene right
That's
there.
that's like your signature scene right here.
Yeah.
Again, look at the brickwork on
Yeah.
the bridge abutment. And that it almost looks like sandstone or limestone
Right.
block.
Right.
And so
Beautiful.
it's gorgeous. This is absolutely gorgeous. And to be fair,
To be fair.
in
Oh,
to be fair, jeez, let's not start that. Anyway, in the Midwest, out west, you guys out west have got your absolute gorgeous scenery that you guys get to do. The Midwest, we've got our scenery that we get to do. The South, the same thing. But out east, there is just something about the scenery on the east coast of the United States that is like different from everything else. And I don't know if it's the fact that everything is so compact over there, like everything is so close together, or if it's just the fact that everything is it's just trees all
yeah.
over the place.
Right.
You know, you go through a whole bunch of trees and then boom, you have a city.
Right. Right.
That's and but it's absolutely gorgeous. Here's one of their handful of box cars that they have. Um, Not sure what the make on this car. It looks almost like it's a could that be one of those Berwick kind of cars? Not sure what the end. I was trying to figure out the end here.
It's a odd end.
Yeah, it's kind of odd end. It could be an ACF type of car or a Berwick maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not too up on that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But simple, simple paint scheme.
Right.
Um, Here's one of the passenger cars they have, a baggage car that's kind of,
Mm. It's a little.
the little TLC.
Yeah.
Look at how high up the handbrake is on this, though. Look how high up that thing is. It's
Yeah. I'd need a step stool to get up that high. That's for
yeah,
sure.
no kidding, right?
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of photographers, and I'm not going to go through a whole bunch of these, but there's a bunch of photographers in on Flickr who have taken photos of the Housatonic, and there are some absolutely stunning photographs.
Sure.
Um, it I mean,
Whoa.
how yeah, right?
Yeah.
How how do you not fall in love with something like this? You know, I just
That is really cool.
yeah. eh, the old the iconic East Coast signals right there.
Yep.
Um,
So, Mike, oh, that's a cool scene.
and that's something.
That is, I mean, if that, I don't know, I would think you would see that scene a lot in New England.
This is taken
That stream.
September 27th, 2020, and there's that number 22, the Bangor and Aroostook GP7U.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really awesome. So this is like the Hallmark channel for short lines.
Who who's
This
who's
Iron
somebody
Mule
oh,
2004. But I just so there's yeah, there again,
the
yeah,
the
it's a really
the
cool little
depots
railroad.
I mean, come on, really? Waterfalls? It's,
Well, that's a
you know,
dam.
that's a damn waterfall.
It's a dam. Let's I mean, someone's going to have to fact check that. But again, so you're seeing a lot of picturesque scenery here. Basically, it almost looks like it's frozen in time in a little bit there but some really
Yeah.
iconic shots. And then the locomotives, I mean, for the modern age, right? They're kind
Right.
of a throwback to the 60s and 70s almost a little bit with, I mean, what, Penn Central, and they had a ton of Jeep 35s, didn't they? And
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's just if you are really the dieselshop.us, the diesel shop, all one word .us.
hmm,
This is their they do a really good job of having like motive power rosters for nearly all the railroads in the United
yeah,
States. and they always try to do their best they can to get the history of the locomotives on there as well.
Right.
So, you know, it's worth taking a look at, and I know it's bigger than what we've done in the past. I mean,
Right. I mean, it can't all be that. What was it? That 7 miler that we did?
we did a 3.5 mile
Three and
one.
a half miler in California, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it was one of the biggest states and one of the smallest railroads.
Right.
Yeah. And this
And
is one of the
there's
smallest states, and this is one of the biggest short lines.
the biggest short lines.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So, you know, check it out, have some fun with it. If nothing else, learn something about it, and maybe you might see something that, like a scene that they off of their line that, ooh, I might want to recreate something like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
I always talk about looking beyond the photograph. You and
Oh,
I have
sure.
talked about that,
Right.
where it's not enough, like in here, this photo, there's quite a bit to take away from this photo other than the two locomotives. So it's, it all is about what you want to see in the photo and what you can take away from it,
Sure.
so,
Certainly. So
but
yeah, this was a good one, Mike. I just want to give a shout out to the chat. DNH and S scale, Robert Welke, New Haven Rails, Joe DeLuso. Thank you for adding the I guess the color commentary there about the railroad on the side and filling in some of the gaps. So just again, it was really cool to get all of this information about a little railroad all at once here. So thanks to the folks in the chat for keeping us honest and helping out. And Mike, that was a good one.
thank you.
That's
I
yeah.
tried. Now I've got to figure out where we're going next. What's after Connecticut? Anybody in the chat? Tell me right now. What's the state alphabetically? What's the state after Connecticut? I'll take a look here. That's
Oh
not it.
man. Let's see here. No, we're not doing that. So what I want to let's transition now to the main topic this evening. So we got 48 folks still with us on the live stream
Yep.
here. Typically our shows go from anywhere from an hour to hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours. So we're going to talk about the main topic of freelance model railroads this evening. So looks like we got 51 up in the chat now. So if you
Mississippi, Delaware.
if you guys have comments, questions, or the comical relief, continue to bring that. But tonight is the freelance model railroads, and then I think what we're going to do too is get the crew involved here and have them shout out if they do a freelance railroad themselves. What do they call it? That type of stuff, and all that good stuff. So Mike,
now are we going to do straight freelance, or because proto freelancing is almost an entire animal onto itself?
Yes. So I this is also a nice little plug for our Facebook group, the Second Section Podcast. You can find us on Facebook. Member there asked the same question about tonight's topic, Paul Kasser, or Kassar. He asked, are we going to do proto freelance versus freelance? And I said, that could be its own show altogether. So, but I think what I'd like to do is stick to the I guess what I would consider a freelance railroad, like the Mascoutin Valley or the Farland Terminal, where we're essentially making something up, imaginary type land. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I'd like to stick with that kind of a topic,
Okay,
because there's so many avenues we can go down with that.
Yes.
So I'll I guess there's no real good way to skin this pig, to be honest with you. There really isn't, except for to dive right into it and
Let's do it.
And say, why did you decide to model a fictional railroad over a prototype railroad?
Okay, so why did I decide to do freelance. So
Yes.
I think there's a couple of factors at play here. I think for me, I've always liked the idea of almost being like an owner of my own railroad, so to speak. Um, and I've always liked, um, you know, creating. I think is the big thing. The creative element that goes into creating a freelance railroad, really keeps me engaged. Not only do you have to come up with, the logo and all of that stuff, but for me right now on my Mascouten Valley, I'm I'm just, basically settling on a place and time. And so right now, the first iteration of the Mascouten Valley was set in the 1980s, but I've shifted that forward now into the early 2000s. So for me, I get to essentially play God in a sense and pick where and when my railroad happened in time. Plus, I don't have any limitations, so to speak. So long as I keep it within the time era, I can have possibly a dash nine with a an SD 39 all in the same railroad. So I think having that freedom to do it what you want is really appealing to me, as opposed to being really pigeonholed into a specific prototype, or even just having to you know model what's kind of been given to you by the manufacturers.
Yeah. Now, see, for me, I it kind of started. I see somebody in there. Yep, that was exactly the comment that I was just about to talk about. The Virginia and Ohio and the Utah belt were the two
Yeah,
model railroads that really got me the like bit me the most with the freelancing bug. And one of the things that I always admired about those two railroads was their ability to make them seem realistic. They seemed like they actually existed. Like with what's his name with the Utah belt. He he has gone and progressed the railroad as time
yeah,
has progressed. So
right,
things he hasn't said, I'm just sticking with this era. I'm not doing this or I'm doing this. As actual time has progressed, he's actually progressed his railroad. So now the SD9s and F7s that we used to see in model railroader, those are all retired. They're
right.
gone. Um, now it's all big 6-axle units and stuff like that. So Eric Brom, yep, or Broman, yes, and it's just you know really was fun. Was it Alan McClellan did the same thing with the V&O.
Yep.
Where at one point he progressed the railroad with newer power and things. As a matter of fact, I just watched his video about the Virginian and Ohio here not
Yeah,
too
right.
long ago. And it was just a really interesting. Those two railroads were really interesting. Now, I've always been a Milwaukee Road fan. I've always been a uh Milwaukee Road guy. I've wanted to model that, and I just can't do it. And the reason I can't do it is because I also like the MP. I like the
Mhm.
Katy. I
Yep.
like there's too many things that I like to want to pigeonhole myself into modeling just one railroad. So my solution was to come up with my Wisconsin and Midwestern years and years and years ago. I think I might have been 16 or 17 when I first came up with that railroad. And uh, it's had several different layout iterations in the past, and I've never really completed anything. I've done a lot of work online with it, or like on the computers with it. But I created a railroad that, looking at the state of Wisconsin, there's a reason why nobody ever built a railroad diagonally from Green Bay, Wisconsin, all the way down to Dubuque. If anybody ever goes and looks at the topographical maps of the state,
Some hills in
there,
the way there.
yeah, there's a couple of things in the way. But my Wisconsin Midwestern did some engineering marveling and overcame those things and went all the way to Dubuque. Then I decided to scale that back to just Green Bay to Portage.
Sure.
And now my Farland terminal is now a branch line of the Wisconsin and Midwestern that the Wisconsin and Midwestern abandoned or filed for abandonment, and to follow like closer prototype behavior, the industries and businesses that were being served by the Wisconsin Midwestern on the line got together, formed a company, and 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 purchased the line from the Wisconsin Midwestern and created the Farland terminal.
Sure.
So I could still use all my Wisconsin Midwestern equipment, or use the Wisconsin Midwestern equipment, but I could still use Milwaukee Road. I can use Chicago Northwestern. I can use Katy. Anything that was around like 83 to 85, I could still use that.
So yeah, so I guess I think this is kind of a good time. There was two questions in the chat that one came from Split Rock, and basically it says, does modeling a prototype box you in too much, or is it an asset that keeps you in the story?
I think it's a huge asset, and it's also a burden.
Sure.
I think it's actually both, to be honest with you. The asset part of it is you know what you need to do. You know, when you look at a thing, you know the buildings you need to build, you know the industries you need, you know all
Right.
that stuff. All that stuff has been done for you in real life.
Right.
The burden portion of it is it limits you in your creativity, because if you're actually going to be, now, before I keep going on that thought, you guys can do whatever the heck you want. There's no limits to what you want to do. However, if you start adding things that weren't really there, now you get into the proto freelance side. I think there's three different trains of thought. You have the prototype modelers, you have the proto freelancers, and then you have the freelancers. None of us are wrong. None of them are wrong. None of them's one better than the other way. It's just how you want to approach your modeling. And for me, I couldn't do my prototype part with the way I wanted to. So because it was limiting for what I have here. You know
Sure.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like my house is kind of small. There's no way I'd try to model the Tehachapi Loop here.
Right. Right. So, and I think there's one piece that I think sometimes the prototype can actually help out with freelancing. So I'm going to bring so this locomotive here is my Mascoutin Valley. It's a GP7 that I did, but
Yep.
this one is modeled off of Chicago Northwestern FRVR 4133.
Oh,
so
perfect.
so the bearing caps and all that, the spark arresters on the top of the model, the beacon, all that stuff. I use that as, this locomotive was picked up from the Wisconsin Central, when they got rid of it, or wanted to scrap it, and my broke railroad came along and picked it up and has used it in service. So I think that kind of, Mike, that kind of ties into the question here from Tom Klomoski. So what do you think makes a freelance railroad realistic?
Well, what do you think?
I think it's actually trying to. I think there's a couple things. So, you can't say, for me, you can't say you model 1945 and you have dash nines running around on the layout.
Right.
And so I think you want to have, you want to stick to a time and a space, and then have equipment be relative to that. I think that's one of the things you really want to, you don't want to, at least, and this is my opinion. You can do whatever the heck you want, right? But in my opinion, I think you want to have it relative to time and space. So you don't want to have a coal mine, in the middle of central Wisconsin. You don't want to have, let's say, I don't know, I don't know, like a gold mine in Southern Illinois. They just, those things, they just would never be there, right? So you got to bring some plausibility to it. So northern Wisconsin, iron mining, lumber, those types of things, you wouldn't typically have, stuff outside of that there, not much in the way of grain, that type of stuff. So I think one of the key aspects is try to keep it prototypical, but then stretch it a little bit, right? Bring in some new power. And I think one of the other things that's good is you got to bring in a backstory.
Yeah, and that's part of it for me. Is I always found that it's the easy part is building the layout, right? That's easy. Anybody can throw some sticks together and throw track on it and call it a layout, no matter what, whether you're freelancing or whatever you're doing. Yeah, I don't understand that, but okay. But to me, it's the story. What is the reason for existence for the freelance railroad? Um Freelancing does give, like you said, it gives you more freedom to be able to come up with things, but like you said, you're not going to find you're not going to find a huge like mountain type coal mining in central Wisconsin.
Right.
Wisconsin is basically paper agriculture. Northern Wisconsin is mining, timber industry, things of that nature. There are things that you can do. There's things that just look out of place. Now, it's not saying that you couldn't do it, but there's, I mean, because you can do whatever you'd like, but it's just, if you're doing the mountains of West Virginia, that kind of screams coal mining,
Right.
and stuff like that. So I think depending on the location of where you want your railroad to exist from is kind of important in telling the story, and creating that backstory helps in your modeling.
Sure.
And there are some places out there. I think one of the railroads, I don't even know if it exists anymore, is the Great Lakes Eastern, and
Hmm.
that railroad, I believe it was like Conrail and who all merged. It was like it was like a couple of big class 1 railroads merged together to create this one enormous railroad in the United States. And I have some decals. I have some HO scale decals for them. But the story was interesting. It's I like going to guys' layouts who do freelancing. Mike Pulitzer.
Sure.
Mike Pulitzer, he does one called, it has a railroad called the Fitzgerald Western. His paint scheme looks very similar to Wisconsin Central paint scheme. He does freelance railroading, but with a semi-prototypical twist to it,
Yeah.
because he's kind of on the edge of freelance, proto-freelance. He has town names that exist, but not everything that he has is exactly what it's supposed to be, where it's supposed to, in those towns, because he's taken the liberties to use modeler's license, which is great. And his layout's
Yeah.
his layout's always been a lot of fun to run and operate. And so, yeah, I think when it comes to doing it and figuring out what you want to do, deciding how big you want to be is one thing. If you want to have a layout or a railroad that is BNSF UP type size, go for it.
Sure.
You can have the railroad as big as you want. What part of it are you going to model? See, that's the difference.
Right.
Here,
Right. So I think that brings up another so I guess the big topic that we're hitting on here with freelance railroads, right? So you look at the Utah belt, you look at so we'll throw Split Rock under the bus here. You look at the Split Rock Mining Company, you look at some of the other big, you know, or the, I guess, published freelance model railroads out there. They're all
the mommy.
plausible, right? Yeah, the Mommy, or the was it the Allegheny Midland, right? That
Yep.
was a Tony Custer um, model railroad. So, you know, like those freelance railroads all had that thing of plausibility working for them. Virginia, in the Virginia and Ohio is another one. They looked like they were a real um, they at one point were a real railroad. There were, I guess, rumors or fan fiction about Alan McClelland making up business cards for his model railroad and going to coal mines and handing this VNO railroad to people, and it was, you know, almost like they just believed them, and he would walk in and get in shots for the for his railroad that he was trying to build. And so I think that's part of it is really you know, try to make it as plausible as possible.
Well, look at guys like Tom Johnson with his Logansport and Indiana Northern, and now he's
Yeah,
got moved down. That's gone now, and now he's down in Florida, and he's got a bedroom size. I think it's might even be smaller than Tom Klomoski's size. That
really.
yeah, is Cass County Railroad. Uh, but there's that, and we can't be doing this without talking about Mike Conflone
Sure.
and the Allagash Railway and the things that he's done. And he's actually flip-flopped back and forth a little bit with the completely freelance, and then going to the, hey, my railroad got bought by Guilford, so now all this prototypical stuff comes flying in or starts to make appearance. And I
Right.
believe he may have gone back to being just
Independent.
independent again. So I think that's one thing that doing freelance railroading, like you said, gives you the plausibility. Plausibility can be measured in a lot of different ways, you know, depending on how you or what you're trying to accomplish, I guess would be the best way of doing it. Like
Sure.
if you want a Luke Lemon size layout, you know,
And I do.
and who wouldn't,
Right.
you know, you could really go, you know, all sorts of crazy with what you're doing, because
Right.
you have all the room in the world. Now, on my hand, I have very limited space. I know you have somewhat limited space.
Awkward space. Yeah.
Awkward space. You know, not
Yeah.
everybody's got a perfect rectangle to be able to do their stuff in. So it's sometimes you have to fit the railroad to your room size that you have.
Sure. Exactly. So I guess that's the other thing, right? So let's talk about equipment. So you on your so you have the Farland Terminal Railroad, right?
Yes.
And what was your main determinants for essentially putting together the locomotive roster that you put together? Or even better yet, before we even go down that road, how about a logo? How about picking your logo and and any influences there, and why did you pick the color scheme you picked?
Okay, well, I'm having a technical difficulty. My boom mic is about ready to fall right off here.
It's
for
looking
some
good.
reason.
I mean, again, top rate production here from the Second Section podcast. Hashtag not sponsored.
No, who would want to sponsor this?
Yeah. So we do have a question here from Split Rock. What years is the Farland Terminal in the Mascoutin Valley situated in?
Farland Terminal is 1983 to 1985.
Okay. And the Mascoutin Valley has been propelled forward from 2000 to 2005.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I wouldn't or won't at one time advance my railroad into a more modern era. I'm just trying to stick with what's available in S scale right now to help accommodate equipment and things of that nature. So
Right.
I don't want to start. My railroad's not designed to be huge. So
Right.
um, now designing. What was the question you asked me about?
So we're going to talk about two questions here, and if other people in the chat have questions that they want to bring up, and in fact, why don't if you have a freelance railroad out there, why don't you put the name of it down in the chat, and we'll bring it up here, so you guys can get a little press on your model railroads out there as well. But Mike, I just want to talk about like what were the driving factors in picking the logo, picking the paint scheme, essentially for your equipment?
Okay, I'm gonna start with my Wisconsin Midwestern, and I don't know. Do you have a picture of one of my Wisconsin Midwestern units?
I do, and I can bring it up.
Yeah, could you do that if it's
Sh-
not too much? Because I don't have one handy right quick. Well, I do have
I
one,
do.
but
I got the
okay,
GP28, right?
okay,
So
yeah,
I'll bring that up.
all right. So one of the driving factors for before I get to my Farland terminal, when I was in HO scale, my railroad was the Wisconsin Midwestern, and that railroad still exists. The whole premise behind the railroad was the fact that we weren't rich. We did not have, you know, an enormous amount of money to be able to afford flashy paint schemes. We did not have money to be able to afford things that needed paint schemes and high maintenance things regarding regarding the paint schemes on the locomotives. So one of the driving factors behind how I designed this is I read an article one time about the Rock Island and when they went with their bankruptcy blues scheme. And the question is the fact that, or the question that was raised was, why would a railroad that was in financial discord use such a flashy paint scheme that required so much maintenance to keep looking nice? It was a beautiful paint scheme, but it cost a lot of money to not only paint but to maintain. Now, on the other hand, you had a railroad like the Southern Pacific that had a lot of money at one time, and their paint scheme was very simple. It was just, the red nose with the solid gray body. That was it. And it
Right.
said Southern Pacific on it.
Right.
That's where I drew my inspiration. Now, the colors on mine this is Santa Fe blue on the bottom here, the sill, and
Yep.
then L&N gray, Louisville and Nashville gray, and Don Manlick did the he's been long since deceased now, unfortunately. He did the decals for me,
Sure.
and and then the chevrons also. And I wanted to just keep the engine simple, no turbochargers. Turbochargers cost money to maintain. Units needed to be normally aspirated. What I mean by that is they needed, they did not have a turbocharger on them. That's why I have the GP. I wanted GP 35s, but the normally aspirated version of a 35 is a 28. So I went with a fleet. My railroad has a fleet of GP 28s. So even though 26 were only built, in my world, I bought more. We bought, 10, 15, 20 more of these.
Sure.
So the the ability to keep the railroad plausible, like we said, and I think starts with things like your paint scheme, making sure that your scheme doesn't how can it's a really weird word
It's almost like you don't outkick your coverage, right? So,
right, yes, exactly.
yeah. So basically, you don't want to go all bankruptcy blue if you're modeling a struggling railroad.
Right. Now, I did at one time do a bicentennial unit that I was really happy with, and I
Yeah,
can't for the life of me figure out what I ever did with it or who I gave it to or sold it to, but it was red, white, and blue, and it turned out great. It
yeah,
turned out great. It was just something like Luke is always talking about. It's something different to make the regular stand out a little bit more, you know?
yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of the way I came up with my paint scheme. And I know you have a very similar paint scheme that's very simple also,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know.
mine is very very simple. So the Mascoutin Valley, it's just basically whatever they could get their hands on. So this is just a green dip, not very original. The M is actually an M and a V together, but that was based off of the Rock Island logo. So it was made up in the 70s. So I have a green locomotive here. This is a GP7. Um, and then I have my other locomotive here that I have painted up as an SD35. And this, I put the story behind it that it was an ex-Southern unit. So it has
I like that.
has the chevrons and all that, to go with it. But again, very simple. Not much going on with it. I didn't, again, didn't want to have something too flashy that I couldn't maintain, right?
Yeah. Now, see, there again, you see a lot of railroads nowadays. Like, I believe there's one I think it's in Utah or Colorado, Rock and Rail.
Yeah.
Their engines are they're bright yellow
Wild.
and red. They're
They're wild.
crazy looking engines, but super cool, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that a lot of modelers that want to do freelancing can take some really cool pages out of what these railroads are doing nowadays with paint schemes.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
don't I think looking back, like era specific would maybe sound a good way of doing it. Like the early 80s was kind of a time of transition in the United States railroad wise.
Hmm.
You had a lot of railroads disappearing, but you also started to have a lot of short line railroads popping up. And so you can, as you progress into the 2000s, you start seeing more and more flashy paint schemes on on uh on locomotives. You start seeing more uh elaborate colors, colors. The gone are the days of just plain gray or
Right.
black or
Right.
whatever it is. They're not afraid to you know dip their toe into the color wheel and see what comes out. It's interesting. Now you fast forward to like to my Farland terminal. My railroad, it's kind of a startup to a degree.
Sure.
So I haven't really developed a paint scheme yet for my railroad. I'm using a former Norfolk Western SW9 is what it is. I've just simply taken an orange stripe and put it on the side because that's the color paint that they had handy at the time.
Yeah.
For
Right.
whatever reason, that was the color paint that they had. And and so they made an orange stripe on the cab and put FT and the number 800 on the side, and that was it. But I've got it so that the N and W is ghosted on the side of the locomotive. So you can tell that it's a Norfolk Western, and I have other small decals on the locomotive that you could tell that were from the Norfolk Western
Just like ghost type lettering, right?
ghost type lettering. Yeah. So the history of the locomotive is very clear. Now, will the Farland terminal one day get a new or get a paint scheme? Probably. Um, but that's yet to be determined.
So
I gotta drum up some business.
yeah, right. David Winther in the chat has a quick question. Have either of you painted up boxcars for your line? So I've done patch out jobs for my line, and then my Jennies for my line have their own paint scheme. So I
I,
have a throwback paint scheme here with the Wisconsin logo in there for the Mascoutin Valley. That's my throwback
yep.
logo. And then I've also done Jennies here with the current Mascoutin Valley logo.
I'll go get one right now. I forgot to grab it. Hold on.
So
More good.
So there's some good questions and comments coming in here from the chat. Let's see here. Sue, the Milwaukee Road, says it's good to see Greasy Meat Hands share his railroad's vision. The rock-inspired logo looks sharp, subtle, not overdone. And just for anyone who joined late this evening, I did wash my hands. So all the rolling stock and locomotives that I'm handling should be grease-free when I'm done. So let's see here. Split Rock's got a question out there. When you go or visit, operate a freelance layout, do you want to get into their story, get hooked, or do you just want to run trains? Ooh.
Ooh. Okay, I'm back with you.
You're back with me. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm going to bring you up.
All right, here's my Farland Terminal locomotive.
Okay, let me put you up on the screen there so everyone can see that.
All right, so if you angle it just the right way, some point in time, but see, like that's the whole locomotive. That's it.
Right.
That's all there is to it. And if you angle it, there we go. Kind of partly see the NW right by the ladders there. So and then on the ends, or on the nose, there's a white stripe there.
Yep.
That was usually where on the Norfolk Western units, that's where the road number would be right above that.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. You're drawing some inspiration from a railroad that's, operated in anthracite country.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my Wisconsin Midwestern, this was an original, like in S scale, they did these cars for Cargill.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the plate on the side that said Cargill was nothing more than double stick taped on.
Really?
Yeah, very, very simple. Just popped it right off and away I went. Well, that left me with an entirely blank car with all the detailed data and everything else. I just took the old road numbers off, made my own decals, and created my Wisconsin Midwestern.
Sure.
I still have to paint the trucks on it, but now, if you notice the number,
and I don't, because I'm partly blind here.
Oh, I might.
You're focusing in and out, but I guess, what is the number, Mike?
It's the 44-2700.
Okay.
Well, my Wisconsin Midwestern bases their freight car fleet around the capacity or the cubic foot capacity of the car. So this series is a 44-27 series. So I might have 100 of these, and I'll vary the numbers on them so that it looks as if the fleet is larger than what it actually is. I might only model 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
But you vary the size of you vary the number instead of having them sequential. You vary the numbers so that way it looks like you have a larger fleet of freight cars than what you actually do.
So there's a couple questions I do want to get to, Mike, and I apologize for interrupting. So Split comes back, says, when you go or visit, operate on a freelance layout, do you want to get into the story, get hooked, or do you just want to run trains?
Yes.
I really enjoy. I'll say that I do want to run trains, but I do really enjoy the backstory that the modelers come up with and the creativity that they use to say, well, we're taking equipment from this era and that era, and from this railroad and that railroad, and interchanging here. And you know it started off as a 5 mile piece of track back in 1804, right? So
Yeah.
those are the things I really like to get into, with the story. But again, at the end of the day, sure, I love running trains.
Oh, in that bottom line, we all like running trains. I mean, that's
Yeah.
but yeah, I I find it very interesting, especially when it comes time to how they've done their rosters and how where like you said before, where they've drawn their inspiration from. Because I think deep down every freelancer actually will, like with my Milwaukee Road switch stands. There's
Yeah.
no doubting those are Milwaukee Road switch stands.
Right.
I'm gonna have them on my layout. There's my Milwaukee Road influence on my layout.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that every freelancer has those prototype influences someplace on their layout.
Right. And
So,
yeah, like for me, I'm gonna have a Chicago Northwestern depot, right? So I got a
yep.
I got a Rinse Relic, uh, number two C&W depot. I want that on my model railroad, and it's gonna be that C&W influence on the Mascoutin Valley.
Yeah, I mean, it, when you talk about doing freelancing, there's so many rabbit holes you can go down. Um, I think that once you've settled on the where and when,
Yep.
you need to kind of go with the why. Because every railroad just doesn't exist just for the sake of having two pieces of track or two rails next to each other and having cars go back and forth.
Right.
There's a purpose behind it.
Right.
And so, like for my Farland terminal, I'm just a small little railroad that is servicing a handful of small customers that wanted to maintain rail service. The track isn't going to be the greatest. It's not going to be the prettiest. It's not going to be 60-mile-an-hour mainline stuff. You're just going to be trundling along, you know,
Right.
along a beat up old railroad. Now, my Wisconsin Midwestern, that railroad is designed to service the central Wisconsin agricultural industry, the paper industry in Green Bay. It's supposed to be a bridge route
Yep.
for between Green Bay and like the Milwaukee Road and Portage, to help bypass cars that need to go west to the Twin Cities without having to go all the way to Milwaukee. Um, there's far deeper far deeper purposes there for what that railroad is involved in doing. And so finding the why for your railroad, like Thomas Gazier's Split Rock, yeah, everybody over there at the crossing gate, they always joke about him. That he moves dirt, you
Red
know,
dirt.
red
Red
dirt,
dirt.
red dirt. He's moving red dirt, but there's different types of red dirt, and but you go and you take a look at photos of his railroad and his layout. There's no doubting what that is. You know, he's there to move ore, and
Right.
to piggyback onto that, if you ever stop and take a look, he made a very good point with their last episode. He doesn't say a railroad on there. He's a mining company.
Yeah. Right.
So like LTV, North Shore Mining, these guys have big railroads, big pieces of railroad operations. But they're a mining company.
Right. Or
So
Erie Mining Company.
or
Right.
Erie Mining. So you could be an industry. Well, look at what we did when we were down in Arizona, or not Arizona, Colorado, for the electric railroad that was just all to itself. You know, that just did nothing but you go from a coal mine to a power plant and back. That's all it did. You
Yeah.
know, so I think you need to establish the why, and then you can start really diving into what you want to do as far as what you want your layout to look like, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good um point that just adds to that plausibility, right? Your railroad should have a purpose. And I think that's one of the things of, or one of the, I guess, keys to making your freelance model railroad, almost, to be as realistic as possible, is that purpose. Otherwise, you're just basically, running around, running around a Christmas tree, right?
Yeah, running
So
around a
like,
Christmas tree. Yep.
but so I, boy, Tom's got a ton of good questions tonight, and so he's got one here. So what would be the top 5 ways to make a freelance believable? And he's asking the host in the chat, and there are some good notes here in the chat.
Boy, I tell you what, wow, he's got to stop asking so many loaded questions.
Yeah, he
Crying
does.
out loud. I mean, come on. It okay. Top 5.
Top 5.
Top 5.
Top 5.
Top 5. Number 5 from the home
Number
desk
5.
from the home desk in Poughkeepsie, Indiana, or wherever the heck it is.
Okay.
Your motive power roster.
Your motive power roster.
Make it believable. Because if you're running, and what I mean by that, this is just my personal opinion. If you're running a railroad kind of like that little lumber company railroad, or that little lumber that went out in California,
Right.
you're not going to be putting -9s on that. You're not going to have AC 4400s running on that thing. You're not going to have 200 car trains.
Right.
So make your rosters believable. That's number 5.
Number 5. Make your rosters believable.
Yep. I'll let you handle number 4.
No, this is per person.
Oh, number 4, I would say would be minimize the exaggeration. So there's always something to be said about making industries larger than what they realistically should be for where they're at. Yeah, that's a good one. Sticking to your era. So, you may have a paper mill, let's say a paper mill, and if you have it in some small, tiny little town, most likely you're not going to have this enormous paper mill that is like sprawling and takes up 100 acres that gets 200 cars a day and all this other kind of stuff. In all likelihood, that paper mill isn't going to be in a town of 500 people. However, making sure you have the industries that are set for that era and the size that you really realistically can handle. Because sometimes some industries like paper mills and stuff can get a little unruly. So make sure that the industries that you are modeling are realistic. That's my number 4.
Okay. Modeling industries realistic to your setting.
Yes. That's a good way of putting it. Okay. My number 3.
Number 3.
Do not overload your layout with track. That is a issue on no matter what you're doing. But when it comes to doing freelance, I feel it's especially important because you have to create the track plans for everything you're doing. There is no prototype to draw from. You're creating everything. Now, you could take nuances of prototype railroads and kind of twist them into what you need. But when it comes to loading up a layout, making sure that you are not putting like a foot wide layout and you don't have 10 tracks going all the way across, you know,
Right.
making sure that you have a track plan that will fit your layout, I guess would be a good way of putting it. A
Okay.
track, I guess that's the best way I could put it. That's
Sure.
my number 3.
Okay.
Number 2.
Number 2.
Like I'm just gonna take this and I'm gonna split the one that I said motor part and Tom said stick to your era.
Yep.
That is my number 2.
Okay.
Is make sure that you're doing things specific. I mean, to the era that you want. You know, you didn't really see like on the Utah belt. You never saw ditch lights show up until after he got into the 1990s modeling. You didn't see ginormous 6-axle units, pulling, 40-foot box cars, you know, um, making sure that you are sticking to the era and do some research for that era to see what other short lines were doing of that day, because that can help. Like when a lot of class 1s got rid of 40-foot box cars, a lot of short lines, class 2s and class 3s at the time, a lot of those picked up those 40-foot box cars. I know the Pickens Railway was shipping with 40-foot box cars like into the mid 80s, So use using making sure that the era that you're paying attention to the era that you want to model, and having your equipment reflect that.
Sure.
And the number one my number one thing is, and this is going to be so cliche. This is just so cliche, but it's true. Have fun with it. Have fun with it. Have fun with the process.
Sure.
Talk to other guys who do freelance railroading, you know, um, and talk to other guys who do prototype railroading, because you can learn so much from doing those things that it will absolutely help you get a focus, and it will help you understand how things should look. Because I find freelance railroading very difficult, because you have to tell the entire story. There is nothing there that's been done
Right.
for you.
Right.
So you have to, everything from the backstory to what you're actually modeling, all of the stuff in between, you have to have almost a reason for. And so have fun with that process. And I think that if you're having fun with that, you're learning from it, and that is going to make your modeling so much better. I think your railroad will become very realistic and very plausible, because you've taken the time to be detailed about what you're actually trying to do. If any of that makes any sense.
Whew. No, that was good. Um, so those are pretty good. I guess 5 things that you want to do to make it realistic. I'll give you my 5 in the abridged version. I think there's something to be said for number 5, in the name of your railroad. So it should sound railroady, I guess. You know, so like the Mascoutin Valley is named after a region. I wouldn't call it Phil's Railroad or Tommy's Train Extravaganza. So stick to something that is how railroads are typically named. So like Wisconsin Central, Southern Pacific, they talk about places, geography, those types of things. My number 4 would have to be your paint scheme and graphics should reflect your time era. So I think that's key. It should, there are some wild paint schemes out there in the modern age, but if you're doing the 70s, right? What was the predominant paint scheme? Penn Central, right? Very
Black.
simple. Yeah, exactly. Sioux Line, red and white. Milwaukee Road, orange and black. But it was, big blocks of color. It wasn't intricate, painted details. So I think your paint scheme should be related to that era that you're doing. If in the newer age where it's a little easier to do some fancy stuff, yeah, do some fancy stuff. But if you're doing 60s and 70s and 50s, keep it simple. I think for me, the third thing is the equipment should match your era, right? You don't want dash nines on the layout with a Mikado, right? So, um, unless you're running an excursion train or something like that, and then I think if you're gonna have your own railroad, try to run it like a real railroad. So don't have too much of unless you're a giant class one, don't have too much in the way of diversity of like let's say EMD versus Alco power, right? If you're a small railroad and you're an Alco shop, you should probably all be Alcos because you want to, the real railroads maintained the actual, or when they maintained them, they wanted all the Alcos so that they could cannibalize parts and stuff like that, make it easier to maintain their fleets. And then I think the last thing, am I on 4 or 5? I don't know. But I'll just make it the last thing for me is I forgot what I was going to say. But I think for me, I think for a freelance railroad, you shouldn't be afraid to incorporate the prototype into your freelance. It could be a great guide. You don't have to make every aspect of your story up. So, like for example, if you really like the Chicago and Northwestern Thrall Bay Window Caboose, you could have them run around on your railroad, and you could say you picked a few of them up at the end of an order from Thrall, and you went in on it with the CNW or something like that. So, I think having those things and like your Milwaukee Road switch stands is a great example. Use some prototype details to help pull that I guess to help you tell that story, so you don't have to make everything up.
It's interesting that you mentioned the caboose thing because that actually happened in real life with the Green Bay and Western.
Yeah,
So there's actually two of the Green Bay and Western cabooses were actually part of a Chicago Northwestern order. They were built to CNW standards. The GBW just needed two cabooses, and they just tacked those onto the order. And I can't remember if it's the sixth. I can't remember the numbers right off the top of my head, but there were two of them, and so those kind of things make, like what you were saying, that's completely a plausible thought process. Because those things happened all the time. Like the Milwaukee Road U-boats. I think it's
right,
the U-33Cs. I think they were built to BN standards. I think
right,
those were actually piggybacked as part of a Burlington Northern order.
right.
So, there's stuff like that actually happens in real life all the time. So,
Got another question from Tom here, and again, if anyone else has questions out there for Mike and I, please throw them down. So from Split Rock, what steps will you take next to make the Farland Terminal and the Mascoutin Valley more believable?
well, I'm going to let you handle this one first.
Um, I think oh man, I think for me the next step, since I've moved my railroad up into the I guess the 2000 era, I know very little about operations in the 2000s aside from what I see today. So I'm going to have to go and do some research on how trains, does it differ, how they moved across the systems from that in the 80s. I'm going to have to update my locomotive roster a little bit, and some of my rolling stock. And we're going to have to get rid of roof walks on cars and no cabooses anymore. So I'm going to have to do end of train lights and those types of things. So I think there's going to be a little bit of equipment overall, but I'm going to have to do some research because I want it to be as believable as possible. So I'm going to have to research the prototype to essentially figure out how I want to make my freelance railroad. How about you,
And
Mike?
for the Farland terminal, I think the next step into trying to make it as realistic as I can is to, once I get the track done, actually run it
Yeah,
and see what works, what the best way to run it is, and then come up with an actual operation plan. It's the way I have my track layout set. It's not exactly conducive to doing everything along the way.
sure.
So there's some things that I'm going to have to learn how to do. I'm trying to draw back to when I worked on Dakota Rail, and there were certain things that we did on the way. Like you'd go one direction one day, and then the next day you did all the stuff that way, and then the next day you came back and you did the other stuff the other way. And it was trying to figure out, because as my railroad's name implies, and it's been mentioned before, modeling that last mile.
Yep.
That's what my railroad is I'm modeling that last mile or 2 miles or whatever you want to call it. So my railroad is truly a terminal railroad. I don't have a yard. I don't have anything. I have an engine house because my railroad built one.
Yeah, right.
Because otherwise there was nothing there. There was nowhere to put the locomotive at. So they built a track with an engine house in it on it. And so figuring that out is going to be my next step. And once I get done with that, because of the era that I'm going along with, I'll probably come up with a pseudo timetable and maybe a book of rules or something along those
There you
lines.
go.
Coming up with something like that, not anything that's like like an encyclopedia thick full of stuff,
Yeah.
but something that might be just like some place I have from when I was growing up, or shouldn't say growing up, like several years ago, I had made a timetable for a railroad I had made up called the Farland Railroad. And I have a timetable that I had completed from that I was going to draw off of for inspiration to make one for the Farland terminal. And all it is an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper folded in half. That's
sure,
all
just
it was.
a pamphlet.
Just a pamphlet. That's all the Brilliant and Forest Junctions was just a 8.5, little piece of paper. So small railroads don't need elaborate timetables and things. So, and one of the things I would like to do is, when that time comes, is I would like to have enough of them made up so like when guys come over to operate, if they want, they can actually take one of my timetables home with them as like a memento, that kind of like almost like a souvenir type thing, if they want to say, hey, I'm operated on this guy's layout, whatever.
Right.
So just something kind of to take away from the layout, as a reminder of if you had fun or had a horrible time or whatever.
Yeah. So there's I guess a comment in the chat from, I'm going to try and not butcher the last name, Jim Kongshog here. And it says tips for staying focused on freelance without continuing to change overhaul ideas. So I do have a couple of things that I do want to show that are some nice resources for coming up and building a freelance railroad. So the first thing that I'll show is, so I got this book. It's from Kalmbach. It's called Realistic Model Railroad Design. It's written by Tony Custer, but he talks about things that we talked about tonight, right? So, and I'm terrible at camera work here, creating a roster, right? Again, this has been a truly a gem of a production this evening.
One of our better. One
Yeah,
of our
this has
better
been
ones,
one
to
of
be
our
honest
better
with you.
ones. Freelancing with limits. So he goes on and talks about a bunch. And hey, excellent pronunciation. Okay. Hey, all right. At
Hot dog.
least, hey, we're in the front row. But this book, again, I think it's still available at Kalmbach. It's a good resource to get you kind of focused in. Talks about a lot of the things we talked about this evening, and it's just a nice little reference point for you to check back on. Um, and just the title of that, I'll do it one more time here. It's called Realistic Model Railroad Design. I'll throw it up on screen. And that's by Tony Custer, and it's put out by Model Railroader and the folks at Kalmbach Publishing. Again, hashtag not sponsored. And they talk about the Maumee route, the Allegheny Midland, the V&O, some of the more higher profile published freelance model railroads out there and how they were designed. I think the second piece is a Facebook group, and I'm going to share this at my own peril here. Let me see.
Is it
Chrome.
the one I think you're thinking of?
I don't know. I don't know if you think.
No, but I have.
No,
I think I'm part of that one.
it's just called Freelance Model Railroads. And there is a cool bunch of modelers in here that really have done a nice job pushing the limits
Now there,
of
right there, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Drawing inspiration from a prototype.
this
What
one right here.
prototype? Yep. What prototype railroad do you think of when you see that paint scheme right there?
Oh God, it's almost like the Mid South.
Mid-South, exactly.
Hey,
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That it looks almost that screams a Mid-South type of
look at
right there,
this.
Montana Rail Link.
Yeah, look at that. That's a
Yep.
cool design
That's
too.
actually
So
really I like the little half maple leaf on the
the
back,
half
almost
maple
like a
leaf. Yeah,
CP Pac-Man type of thing.
yeah. So again, this for me, look at what they did to.
Uh,
So Tom, I'm gonna have to owe you another $1 on this one. Look at
oh,
that. You can
jeez.
see that pilot from space. It's just brutal. This is where the SDL 39 hurt me right here. I owe you $3 now. But again, this again a cool little design here for your freelance model railroad. So
You should just send Tom a paycheck, and that's
I owe Tom money anyways. I'm sure I owe him money. But again, so I think that is a cool little resource out there for anyone who wants to at least tempt or think about doing a freelance model railroad. Well, there's two real good ones. Again, a host of Facebook groups. Mike Confalone's Allagash, Split Rock Mining Company. He's on YouTube. Eric at imrro.com is on YouTube. Those are a couple of really good resources out there as well for freelance model railroading to really get some good ideas. I know I've been following those guys for a long time as well. So, yeah. So
yeah.
that's that. I guess I'll turn to the chat here. We're carrying 2 hours. We got 32 people still following the stream. Again, thanks for sticking with us all night tonight, folks. Are there any other questions or comments about freelance model railroads that you guys want to bring up?
I think this is a really hard topic to
It is a
discuss, to be
hard
honest with
topic.
you,
It is.
because they're so open-ended. It really honestly is.
Yeah.
There's no wrong way to do any of this. There really isn't. That
Sure.
Now there's one benefit. What was talked about earlier. There's a benefit to doing freelancing compared to doing a prototype. In
Yeah.
freelancing, nobody could tell you that you're doing it wrong. Whereas in
Yep.
prototyping,
Yep.
oh, that was never there. That was never there. That was never there. Oh, okay, well, okay, granted, that's great. I've had to take, well, that switches backwards. Well, if I didn't do it, I'd have to cut through a concrete wall in order to make the track go the way it's supposed to. So I flipped it to, make things the way, the way we need to. Whereas
Yep.
freelancing, Yeah, it's kind of anything goes. There is no blueprint, you know. So
Let's see here. So I have a question here from Jim. Do you have um, when doing freelance, do you use real locations for interchanges or fictional? So I got something. Let me see here. I think I can share on that. Um,
ooh,
no.
oh, there's a great question in there.
What's
Oh
that?
boy, no. Let's finish this one up.
Okay, so I'll give. Let me share the screen here. Let's try this one. So what we have here is my diagram for the Mascoutin Valley Northern Division, and I actually use real towns for the interchanges and the different locations. Um, let's see here if I can zoom in on this so you guys can see it a little bit. But yeah, so I have Amberg, Athelstane, Silvercliff, Spread Eagle, where we're interchanging with the the CN, Chippewa Falls, where we hook up with the UP, and then the southern part of the railroad where we hook up with the Wisconsin Southern in Waupun, Wisconsin. So, yeah, I use real towns. All of these are real towns or places in Wisconsin for my model railroad.
Now,
There's a doozy of a question.
yeah, and to go along on this question, also, I having seen in real life the design of the inside looking out mentality of the hobby. I've seen enough interchanges and different configurations throughout my nearly 30-year career that I've I kind of picked out a style of interchange that I feel is going to suit my railroad, and that's pretty much what I'm going to go with when it comes time to getting down to that end of the railroad. So it's you know e- every interchange requires two railroads, right? Or
Yep,
well, at least or two portions of the same railroad. So um there's always going to be give and take on that, and usually the layout side is always you always have the point beyond, like what's beyond what is physically there, right? So sometimes that has to play into your interchanges, and if you have a big enough layout, you don't have to worry about interchanges because you can use your staging as your interchange. You don't have to worry about modeling it so much as like with a small railroad like mine, I almost need to model the interchange, otherwise it doesn't make a lot of sense as to how cars are getting onto my layout.
sure,
So
sure. I think
so oh, go
there's
ahead.
just one other question
Yep.
here, and I'm going to try this one out. I'm going to go with Soko Olds 455 based on the picture there. It looks like he's got some sort of Oldsmobile there. What are your opinions on having somewhat of a vague geographical location versus having an actual physical location that were taken over by your freelance railroad?
Ooh, that's a good well, I
That's
think we kind of covered that a little bit,
yeah, a little
didn't
bit.
we? um Albert, there's the question I was looking at.
So this, yes.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah,
So the answer
just
to
a
your question is I think that it helps to have inspiration from a physical location, but it's like an artist, kind of like Bob Ross. You know, but Bob Ross would go and take a look when he's doing his paintings. He would always look at a lot of different. If you ever listen to how he describes things, he describes going to these locations and seeing certain types of trees and looking at things. He didn't paint the tree exactly the way he saw it. He was inspired by it. So I think that being inspired by an actual location, but turning that around into something that is completely fictional with the nuances of the inspiration is you know, kind of a fun way of doing it, if you ask me. I mean, it's just it makes things, it's your railroad, your rules, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, freelance locomotive leasing companies. All right, there are a ton of them. There are a ton of them, and I am going to share my screen because there's another Facebook page that covers. It's called. I'm going to get to it here.
And while you're doing that,
The
Mike,
Proto Freelance Model Railroading page on Facebook.
ooh,
Stevens Railcar. This has been around for a long, long time. If you've ever followed these guys, Ed Lewis Leasing, EDLX. This whole group of guys. There are guys here who have developed their own style of locomotives, who have taken, they have taken freelance railroading, and I don't want to necessarily say anything that's happened in real life they've almost cut out, but they have virtually created an entire new rail network throughout the United States,
wow.
and it is fantastic. Now, one thing about this lease, if you notice, it's very simple, but yet it has nuances of EMD on it with the little herald here. It's his own herald, but EMD's leasing fleet has heralds on the back, a herald on the nose, simple paint scheme, just kind of like what we were talking about earlier, you know. So, yes, locomotive leasing companies, absolutely. Go for it. Make one. Come up with your own. They're all over the place. I actually thought that Larry's Truck Electric was fake when I first heard about it. So,
That's Mike, you'll have to send me that link so I can add that one to the show notes as well. That seems like a good little resource. Must
okay.
it must be a group. So Mark Hintz comes in and says it depends on who you're associating with. Some people insist that you're freelance, or will still insist that you are freelancing wrong. And I think that's there are those people out there. And again, anything that I say tonight should be, it's my opinion. Um, and especially with freelancing, I really truly believe that there's no wrong way to do it. I just believe that there are ways, or my opinions are kind of what I'd like to see happen on my railroad. So I think from that standpoint, yeah, there are going to be some people like, yeah, you're doing it wrong. But at the end of the day, if it's your model railroad, you can kind of go tell them to pound sand. That's my opinion anyway on that scenario. So good comment, Mark. Um, it is true. People are out there that will tell you it's
Some
always
guys, you can
wrong.
hand them a bag of $1 million, but tell them they got to walk 10 feet over to their right to go pick it up, and they'd complain about having to move 10 feet to their right to go get it.
Yeah,
So
what my dad used to say that you'd. No, I shouldn't even say it. We'll save that one for when you guys meet me in person sometime.
those are post show notes.
Those are post show notes. I don't want to get canceled here in our first
Yeah,
year. I gotta try not to get canceled here. So okay, so this has been a really good show tonight. I think if we only scratched the surface on freelance model railroads. I think this would be a good topic for broken rail. And to
absolutely.
I think we need to deep dive this one. And so I'm going to make one more plug here for the Facebook group. That's where we do our recruiting for broken rail. So make sure you get over there and check us out on the Facebook group and join the online community there. Pretty much a post or two is happening every day out there from either Mike or I or some of the members. So
It's been
good group of
very
folks.
active
Been
lately. It's
very
actually
active lately. Yes. So go ahead and join that. We post all of our upcoming shows there, upcoming topics, and people in the Facebook group have also suggested topics for shows. Mike and I take those under advisement there. So again, I think this will be a good freelance model railroads. It would be a good broken rails. So if you want to participate on that live stream, sign up on the Facebook group, hit up Mike or I with a DM, and I think we should get some of the section crew on the show here to
Oh,
talk about their
absolutely.
freelance model railroads. So,
Absolutely. Love
all
to talk
right,
to some of these guys.
I know it. I do.
Hey, I like you, buddy, but I'll tell you what.
Oh, tell me, we need some new blood in here. So
Yeah.
again, 33 people right up to the end here. I just want to thank everyone in the chat, all the good
Yes.
participants tonight. You guys really make this show fun. And again, we encourage feedback. So hit us up, make comments, share this podcast with your friends, share this podcast with your enemies.
That'll
As
teach
well.
them.
That'll teach them. Make them listen to this. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
um,
No, not again.
yeah, right. So again, Mike, did you have any closing thoughts tonight before we tie up for the evening?
Yeah, I hope that nobody thinks that we're tried to come off as either one of us tried to come off as like this is the absolute guide as to how you should be doing something like this, because when it comes to freelance railroading, the world is your oyster. You can do whatever you want. These are just merely suggestions that if you want to try to make it realistic, that these are just some factors that you should think about, and because like we've said before, you're going to have the naysayers, and we spend an awful lot of money in doing this, and freelance railroading, boy, I tell you what, sometimes you spend more than what you would in a prototype world, because you kind of tend to want to overdo things. So it's just take the time to have fun with it and enjoy the time that you're doing building. It's model trains,
Yeah, right.
it's you know not going to change the world, but you can change the world in your basement.
That's
Remember
true.
that.
Yeah,
Ooh,
you can change history.
that's a
That's a
t-shirt. That's a
ooh,
t-shirt.
maybe that's how. I think we just stumbled across our our walkout line here on
Ooh,
the
maybe.
outro.
Oh,
Yeah,
maybe.
I've
We'll
already
see.
forgot what you said. It was so profound.
Well, you can
So
change the world in your basement.
you could. That's right.
You
That's
can
right. You can
change the
change.
world in your basement. Yep.
Yeah. Welcome to the Second Section podcast. All right, gang. So again, yeah, this was for me. It's a fun topic. I've always enjoyed the freelance, and I really. Ooh, here's an idea. A
Uh-oh.
crossover episode with the Crossing Gate. That would be a
Oh.
fun show.
Now, let's see. What do you have, like a Grey's Anatomy 911 type thing going on, where you or like
What is it, like Chicago Fire and Chicago
Chicago
P?
Fire Police, Chicago
Uh,
PD?
or what is it, like when the Harlem Globetrotters showed up on Scooby Doo, something like that? Remember that? Yeah,
Well, just remember, Ghostbusters, you're not supposed to cross the streams,
right. You
so
don't want to cross the streams,
you're
but then they did.
but
So
then they
I think
did, yeah.
so that's a good idea there. And looks like we got some requests to join the Facebook group. So thank you for doing that. Again,
I love the guys that come in and comment. I love those you guys. You guys are awesome. You
yeah,
think of stuff that we don't think of.
yeah.
So
It certainly adds a degree of content and color to it. So
absolutely.
again, get over to the Facebook page, sign up, and hit us up in Mike or I in the chat, and we'd be happy to catch you guys. So on behalf of Mike, and this is Greasy Meat Hands here. Thanks for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you down the line. Have a good night, everybody.
Night night.